Each state has different rules on who can vote, or more importantly, who can't vote. In Maine and Vermont, prisoners never lose their vote. In 14 states and DC, you can vote as soon as you leave jail. 22 states make you wait until your full sentence and parole period expires. And just 12 states indefinitely limit voting rights for some crimes. But there are only 3 states in America where anyone convicted of any felony is banned from voting for the rest of their life: Iowa, Kentucky, and Florida. In Florida, a felony can be anything from carrying a handgun without a permit all the way up to first-degree murder. So, steal a car in your teens and you can't vote ever. Out of a total population of 20.6 million, 1.6 million Floridians are banned from voting. That's more than 10% of voting-aged adults and more than 21% of African Americans. And that's no coincidence. Florida's voting laws were always designed to reduce the number of black people who could vote. At the end of the Civil War in 1865, white Floridians were worried freed slaves suddenly made up 48% of the population. So they passed laws called black codes, making crimes of minor offences they thought slaves might commit: loitering, vagrancy, stealing cotton. Pretty soon, 95% of prisoners were black. And if that wasn't enough like slavery, the state rented out the prisoners to work for farmers and private companies. And Florida's 1865 Constitution sealed the deal. No person convicted of a felony is qualified to vote at any election, it said. So, bad news for all of those black prisoners. And another which said electors had to have a certain education level to vote, but that only applied to new electors, those who just came of age or were just freed from slavery. So, bad news for the black people that managed to stay out of jail but never went to school. And 100 years later, at the height of the Civil Rights era in 1968, the state reenacted the provisions locking in political control for white Floridians. But hang on, let's go back to that section about felons not voting. There's another bit. It says felons can't vote unless restored to civil rights. That's right, you can apply to be allowed to vote, and all it takes is waiting up to 7 years after your sentence expires, and be sure not to commit any other crime in the meantime. Get certified copies of the charging document, judgment document and sentencing document for every felony conviction. Wait several more years for the application to be processed if it was a more serious felony. You'll also have to go to Tallahassee for a hearing before the Florida Clemency Board. There's a backlog of 10,000 cases though, and they only hear about 400 a year. And that board? Republican Governor Rick Scott and members of his cabinet. Last week, a federal court judge ruled the process is unconstitutional and driven by politics. He cited the case of a white man who had his voting rights restored after telling Governor Scott he'd voted for him. A group called Floridians for a Fair Democracy has now collected more than the required 799,000 signatures to have a constitutional amendment put on the ballot this November to restore voting rights for felons who've completed their sentence. It all matters because Florida's 29 electoral college votes decided the presidency in 2000 and 2004, and in 2016 Donald Trump won the state by under 120,000 votes. But for the law to change, 60% of Florida's existing voters have to support it. Good luck.